Next, we are going to add buttons to the center front of the blouse. As shown in this diagram, internal circles on each of the front blouse patterns sew the two center fronts together, and then a third internal circle on the button pattern sews the button onto the center front of the blouse. To sew the two center fronts together, we are going to create the first set of circles by using the internal circle tool to click and define a radius. Then, we are going to copy the circle and paste them along the center front of the front pattern. Select all the internal circles and then copy and paste them over to the center front of the other front pattern. Next, we are going to use the free sewing tool to sew the pairs of circles together. With the tool selected, double-click on the top point of the circle, and the entire perimeter of the shape is designated as a seam. Continue pairing all the internal circles using this method. And then click the Simulate button to sew the pairs together. However, because the two front patterns are arranged along the same plane in the 3D space, the center front of the blouse has not been sewn together correctly. In general, buttons are placed on the wearer's left side for women's shirts and blouses, so we need to have the front right pattern placed on the top of the left. To do that, we select the right side of the pattern and change the layer of the pattern from 0 to 1. Because the right side collar lays on top of the front pattern, we need to change the layer of the collar as well. Otherwise, the collar will be placed under the front pattern. Now, if we resimulate, the right side pattern is placed over the left, forming a clean center front. After using layers, we need to change them all back to 0 for simulation stability purposes. If we select all the patterns in the 2D pattern window, the Layers tab shows a value of 0, but the tab itself is highlighted in orange. This is because there are layers that are designated as 0, but there are also patterns that are on other layers as well, such as the front right pattern and its collar. Therefore, we are going to use the bar to change the value of all the layers to a different number and then all back to 0. Now that we have our center front sorted out, let's try attaching some buttons. We need to first create a pattern for the buttons using the Circle Pattern tool. With the tool selected, click on the 2D pattern window once, and then enter a radius for the circle to create the button pattern. If we take a closer look at the pattern that is created, you can see that the synced pattern, shown in blue, is not in the shape of a circle, but of a hexagon. This is because the particle distance of the circle pattern is currently set to the default value of 20 millimeters, which is greater than the overall dimensions of the circle. So we are going to change the value of the particle distance for the circle to 3 millimeters, and now the button pattern looks more like a complete circle. To attach this button pattern to the center front of the blouse, we are going to copy and paste the internal circle of the center front of the blouse onto the center of the button pattern. Then, we are going to use the free sewing tool to sew these two internal circles together. When the button is synced over, it is placed on a single plane in relation to the shadow of the avatar in the 2D pattern window, and consequently, it is placed inside of the avatar's body. We can of course hide the avatar to adjust its placement, but we can also just select the button pattern in the 2D pattern window and use the gizmo tool to pull it out and in front of the blouse pattern. Click the Simulate button and the button is sewn onto the center front. However, because the current physical property settings of the button is same as the fabric of the blouse, the button is rather flimsy. To fix this, we select the button pattern and change the preset under the Physical Properties menu to the Buttons preset. Then the surface of the button becomes much more rigid. Next, we are going to load a surface texture onto the surface of the pattern. Then, use the Edit Texture tool to adjust the size of the image. Click on the arrow next to the Show Garment icon and uncheck the Show Seam Lines tab to hide the outline of the button. Next, we can use the same method to finish sewing all the buttons of the blouse. After doing so, change the particle distance of the garment to 5 and the blouse has been completed.